Okay, I guess we are on. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first High Talk. And yeah, today we are going to talk about how relevant is design thinking for business innovation. We have our beautiful Natali Nascimento, the most known influencer at High Interactive, is here with us. And we have a really special guest with us today. We have Hugo Froes. He's a product operations lead at OLX Motors in Europe. And yeah, how are you, everyone? I guess I will greet the ones at home first. And let me just say, if you haven't done it already, drop us a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have plenty more content like this coming up for you. And yeah, hi, Hugo. Hi, Natalie. Are you excited to lead this on?
Yes, hello very much. Let me say I'm very happy to have Hugo with us. I have worked with Hugo before and I learned a lot with him. He is a very sharing person in the work level, and well, thanks for that and thanks for accepting come to talk with us. And well, this is our first High Talk that we are doing at High Interactive. And it's all about that. It's all about sharing knowledge, sharing opinions, and well, finding solutions to different problems that we have with our clients, with the business, with our users. Hugo will be with us talking about how relevant is design thinking for business innovation. So I am really looking forward to know his insights and his opinion, what he
Yeah.
prepared for us. And well, to briefly introduce everyone, know that the most well-known sentence describing a design thinking that is a process that involves understanding the user needs, brainstorming, creating innovative solutions, creating prototypes to test and refine those solutions. With those 5 steps: the empathy, the ideation, prototyping, and testing. And it becomes a process that it's used a really wide range of industries, including technology, healthcare, education, government, as we at High Interactive work with different areas and industries. But design thinking has gained widespread recognition as a power methodology for innovations and for problem solving. However, there have been concerns that its popularity has led to a decline of its effectiveness, with some even suggesting that it has become overhyped or overused. And I would like to let Hugo share his opinion about design thinking. I just want to share one phrase that I saw in some articles that I went to research before this talk with Hugo. That is, Don Norman said, design thinking, it's not a silver bullet, it's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used well or really poorly. And I think it could be all about that, this conversation. And other thing that I want to share is design thinking is often used as a way to legitimize solutions that have already been predetermined. So this can cause a lot of impact and not a really well end up solutions. This last sentence is from Terence Cornell. And Hugo, finally, sorry. uh, in what ways do you think that has design thinking transformed the approach to business innovation? And share with us what you think could be the pros and the cons from your perspective.
Yeah. So firstly, thank you for the invite, and it's a pleasure to be here, and pleasure to be able to share some of my thoughts, and hopefully some of my rambling will make sense to the people listening. So in terms of, the impact, right? So design thinking generally is born from the concept that designers have been finding creative solutions to solve problems for a while, right? And there was this change to how do we apply it to the business world, right? How do we apply it to business problems, to real world problems, so that it's not just, oh, I'm going to make a nice visual or something like that. It's how do I actually solve a problem that will have impact for the users? And design thinking to an extent did that. Obviously, IDEO is really well known as being one of the big firms to try and push that into the public. And even recently, they came out admitting that in some concepts they'd actually lost their way in terms of the design thinking, right? And some of their projects didn't meet the expectations that everybody expected of them. But either way, I think what happened was, and the whole concept behind it was, let's actually challenge the way we're looking at problem solving, right? How we're looking at problems, how we're looking at solving those problems. And design thinking did that. It took us out of our comfort zone, right? It started creating more work around collaboration. It started bringing the user to the table, started bringing the actual people we were designing for into the process, rather than the business is going to decide what users want, right? Or what customers want. We're going to let customers help us decide what they want, right? And what they need. And so it created this whole concept around more creative problem solving and things like that. The problems, the pros, the cons. It's a hard one, right? So like you really said really well, Don. It's not a silver bullet. It doesn't solve every single problem. Assuming. Exactly. It's just a tool, just like any other methodology that exists out there. If we use it incorrectly, if we don't understand it, right? And that's another issue, right? Okay, I've read a great article. Let's use it. right? And you don't know why you're doing those processes, why you're doing those activities, it'll be pointless, right? Because you won't be solving the problem. And so, because I've seen arguments about, oh, this doesn't bring any value, that doesn't bring any value. It's because you haven't understood the value that it can bring potentially. And then another thing is, it's about trusting the process. And what happens is, and this is natural, which is people, when they don't see a result right away, a quick result or something right away, or at the first iteration, what am I going to do? I'm going to push back. Maybe we're going to shift it a bit. Maybe we're going to change a few things. Maybe we, and so what happens is they start creating a bastardized version of design thinking, right? Or they start pushing their influence into what the result will be, and it starts becoming something that wasn't meant to be. This obviously destroys the whole process completely, right? But again, you have to also be careful about the expectations you build about what it can solve, right? And
yes, expectations are really important, right? Establish at the beginning what the teams are going to get in each phase, or in each phase should we start on, or if you are going to jump phases, probably you are not going to get what you need.
Exactly. And I mean, if you're going to solve a problem like global warming, right? Maybe design thinking by itself isn't enough, right? But people think, oh, it'll fit in every single problem we can solve. And you think, no, because a lot of work has to go into that. You need a lot of data points, you need a lot of knowledge, you need a lot of know-how, you need to understand the systems, the patterns, everything, right? Cultures and all. It's much more complex than putting people in a room for a week and trying to solve a problem, right? And it's not going to be that easy. It's not going to be that easy. So you have to break it down into simpler parts. And it's not to say it can't be used to solve some real world problems, and it can. The problem is thinking that that's the only way to do it, right? And it can do it by itself, and it can't. It needs the business side as well. It's not just, for example, a designer can't solve everything by themselves, right? Design focused people can't solve it by themselves. We need collaboration. We need other people. We need extra knowledge. We need people who understand business, who understand culture, who understand, economy, politics, all of these things to help solve these other things. It's not just assuming, oh, I'm going to put 50 designers and design thinking, and it's going to solve everything. It's not that simple, right? So,
yes, it's like you said, it's a tool that the big advantage is that make us work with other areas, other fields that we don't know about. And this is the most important part. We as designers, we can't be in a closed room creating ideas and create disruptive things without thinking of who is going to use, what is the business goals and needs, what could be the technology constraints that we need to take in consideration. And this brings me to other question for you, that is, how do you think that we can overcome this difficult of looking at the design thinking overused as a methodology, to come back to the basics and start to create culture and innovation, and help business in the right way, creating creativity within the organizations? The steps.
It's a hard question. It's a hard question, right? And I don't have a silver bullet, again, using the same terminology. I think it's more about making sure that you bring in a diverse group of people, right? Making sure that diverse people are involved from different backgrounds, both in terms of professionally, but even, culturally, or, bringing diversity, because those diverse thinking, and it challenges the way things are working, right? Also, and this is an interesting one, because I do believe a lot in the process, but we can't be too fixed on the process, right? And this is something that happens, right, where people get so lost in the activities of the process. Let's say, for example, oh, the icebreakers, or the team building things, or in the middle, right, and all that, or building on ideas, that they forget why they're doing those, right? And it goes back to the previous point. So it's yes, those activities are there, but sometimes it's okay to skip those activities if they're not going to bring value to the conversation, right? If they're actually just going to be adding fluff, don't do them just because, oh, the design thinking book says I have to put
check
this.
all the
Exactly, right?
activities.
And I think that's an important thing. And then at the end of the day, it's that type of thing where we have to kind of build up the confidence, right? In terms of the process will create results. But but in the beginning, people have doubts about that, right? They don't trust the process as much. And so how do we create that confidence again? But also it's admitting and being open to the fact that we don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is a clear thing. And so it's a type of thing where grab what you can from the design thinking, but sometimes be clear that you might have to add extra things to bring more value, to make it evolve to something that's mature, well structured, and well thought of, right? And that's okay. That's okay. Admitting you have to have a data analyst in the room, admitting that you have to, I can't think of any other examples, right? But admitting these things and saying, actually, with these more diverse people and things like that, we can build up something stronger. So I think that's the best way of trying to do it. But more than anything, it's collaboration, right? Doing it in groups, discussing these things, but also being careful of not too many big groups, because big groups also, it becomes useless and pointless to do these exercises, because then it's designed by committee. So it's a complex thing. It's not easy.
Yes, and you said one thing that I am realizing and learning, that it's really important that sometimes we are really focused on the activities that we need to do during a process, and talking to clients and stakeholders, we are explaining those activities, and sometimes they don't need to know all these steps and all these activities. We need to be able to show the future vision of what is the goal, what are we working on, and well, we are going to do this path that is going to lead us to this future vision, and we don't need to use all the words and all that wireframing, prototyping, words like that. That, well, not everyone need to know. They just need to know that it's something that we can test it, we can validate it, or we can understand if it works for that business, or if even needed that feature or that idea that someone have and want to build. And that's a very important thing, that we need to step, as designers, need to step down a little bit and learn to talk the language that our clients or users use. Look to stakeholders as someone that we need to understand, and we need to learn how to talk their language as well.
No, it's exactly that, right? And I mean, I remember when we were trying to, and I was at High Interactive, and we were trying to sell, because obviously I worked at High Interactive a few years ago. But when we were trying to sell UX, and similar to if you try and sell design thinking, right? You go into a business meeting, you go into with corporate people, and they'll look and they'll say, well, they're trying to sell a new religion, or they're trying to sell me some crazy idea. It sounds very fun, but it literally sounds like some hippie thing. You're going to go in the corridors and
what am I going to get with all these activities, right?
Exactly, right. For them, it's not important the activities. What's important is, will you get the results that they want, and then what can they expect along that process to build up their confidence that you're going in the right direction, right? And so that's the thing. It's about defining, number one, what can you expect in terms of outcomes of this, right? In terms of the long run, what will we try and achieve for you, what together as a group? And then it's the small steps during that process where you can turn around and say easily, at this phase, you will be able to look at this and make a decision on that, right? So I can present you with this, I can present you what the user needs are, right? But to do that, I might need this, this, and this from you. You don't need to tell them that, you will be doing this co-design, this collaboration, but it's exactly that, right? Involving them and giving them results that make sense to them. It's like, because they need to understand that the project is evolving. And the scariest thing for anyone who contracts a customer, an agency, or a designer, right, is I don't want to throw something in there and I know something's going to come out at the end, right? They want confidence, because that's what happens. It's a black hole, right? It's like, oh, there go designers, throw it into the box and something will come out of it. I don't know when, how, or whatever, but something will come out, right? And we have to shift that conversation and say, no, look, things are going to happen during the process, and what is going to happen, and what can you count on during that process, because they need to have confidence that things are moving along, right? That it's not something where I'm going to do 500 iterations and then show up with a UI. They say, oh, I don't like it. And you say, okay, well, then I disappear again. Then I come with another version of the UI, and they're like, okay, it's too many unknowns. So we have to create that confidence, and it's a great way of doing it is keeping them involved, letting them know about certain milestones.
Yes, let them know that they are going to be part of the whole process, right?
Exactly.
And one question, how, from your experience, do you suggest that we show that the benefits of using a process like this or other process when approaching a client or a business? How could we show the benefits of this process without going to the specific language of the area?
Well, that's the funny thing, right? It depends. It's complicated because you need to read a room, as they say, right? You need to understand the customers you're working with. There are some customers who will actually challenge you and ask you exactly those points that you'll go through, and they'll talk all the right jargon, and they'll say, it's design thinking. I want this. I want the empathy. I want this. And I've got these people available to talk to you, to get involved. And so that's easy, right? Those are the easy customers. Then we've got something more in the middle where what they want is they want to see the results, right? They want to see. So what we have to, so in what I like to approach that in that sense is more around what can we help you achieve? Right? What can we help you achieve? And what do we do? And how long does this generally take? It'll be about this. And what does this include, right? And we ask the activities where they have to be involved and the types of things. And we have that simple plan of, at stage 1, you will get this. At stage 2, you'll get that. But a very high level, right? But you don't have to go into all the details. You don't have to talk the design thinking lingo, if it doesn't make sense. But you can add and say, we're going to talk to customers. Why? Because they will tell us what needs to be done. I need to talk to your people internally because they're the subject matter experts, right? Mm-hmm. That type of conversation you can have. And then there's the third type, which is they don't want to hear any of this. And what they want you to do is basically they want you to just, materialize something for them, right? And we've had this experience, right? I remember at High Interactive, we had some customers that was like that. And there, what we had to do was you had to go into the customer in the beginning and almost do a simple project, which is literally just building something. But during that time, start kind of talking and start of kind of cross-selling. So you start showing the value that you can bring in terms of design thinking, how you can challenge the way they work, the way they think, and that kind of thing. And then what happens is, and we saw this very often, was they then bring us into more complex conversations, right? And they start saying, oh, now we want you part of strategy conversations.
Help me with that. Now I understand.
Exactly. Now I understand why it's important for you to be part of this conversation. And they start including you, and it starts expanding what you can bring in terms of value for the customer. So sometimes it's getting that first step where you get into the customer, and the next step is, okay, now how do I build up that relationship? How do I build up that confidence to then expand?
And those topics that you were talking about, I think they are highly related with the UX maturity of a specific company or a group or a team. And if we are able to understand their maturity and adapt our approach of what they are able to receive at that moment, we probably would be more successful and consequently their projects and the result of the work that we do with them as well, right?
Oh, for sure. And let's be honest, in some cases, it's actually going to be complicated because they want to contract, they've got a budget, a really small budget, but what they actually want us to solve is a big problem. And we know that if we're going to do all the process, it's going to be very expensive, right? So we have to find that middle ground, right? And it's like, okay, can I break it down to smaller part to maybe solve that problem? It's again, the negotiations with customers, it's never easy, right? And some you're going to win, some you're not. Some of them have read the article and they think they know everything. Others haven't. So it's always trying to read the room, trying to figure out what's going on. More than anything, it's always listening to them as well, which is something that doesn't happen, right? Which, for example, one of the things I like to do is when I go to receive the briefing from a customer is I hear what they have to say, and I don't suggest any solutions, right? I don't suggest what it's going to be. What I just keep doing is asking them, what do you mean? Trying to deep dive in everything. And then what we might talk about is some potential previous projects we worked on, but I don't try to give any solution because I don't know enough to give a solution. right? And it's hard because we're in that room and someone says, oh, we want something that does this. And you start thinking, oh, maybe I can use AI for this, or maybe I can use it. And we've half of the time we're not listening to what they're saying anymore. We've switched off because we're thinking about a solution. And that's something I suggest. Don't do that, right? Focus first, see what their problem is, because by listening to them, they will almost tell you what they want and what they need. And so you can then cater everything for them. And at that moment, maybe decide, you know what, this project isn't for us. It's maybe for a simpler, smaller agency or smaller, it's a simple project. They need just one design. They don't need this whole big structure. So it's making that decision and that trade-off at that moment.
Yeah. And I don't know if you can share some examples of how companies successfully leverage a design thinking to achieve innovation or a good result at the end. And, well, how did you adapt to the specific maturity of that company? If you have some example to share.
It's a hard one, right? So there's obviously some industry examples that are well known, and just before starting that, for example, the Design Management Institute did a study in 2015, 2016, where they compared the design or user-centric companies versus the Fortune 500, the S&P 500. And they reached the conclusion that these companies, these design-centered companies, were 211% more effective than an S&P 500 company, right? And this was a study run along 3 years. So, throughout 3 years, this was consistent. So just those numbers are super interesting, right? But then if you look at it, I mean, you've got Airbnb as an example, which is run by design. One of their CEOs is obviously from a design background. You've got
years ago, if you talk to someone and said, well, I am going to stay in the house of a person that I don't know at all, in a country that I don't know at all, but it's okay. Nobody will accept that. And they, turn around the concept and make it work.
And they were almost a flop. That's the interesting part, right? They were almost a flop, but they managed to flip it around. And they talk about that, how they do a lot of iteration, a lot of experimentation, that kind of stuff. Then you've got IBM, which took a gamble and made a huge investment in creating a whole design area in IBM. And they hired someone who came in, they have this entire building, hundreds and hundreds of designers, right? They've become a reference in terms of design, and the enterprise design thinking process and framework is something they now teach and give classes on, right? So the success has shown, and a recent report showed that they were 300%. Their return of investment was 300% above what it was before they had implemented that design way of thinking, right? So another great example, and when we're talking about a company that's traditionally very tech driven, right? And they suddenly did this huge shift. And then you've got PillPack, which is which was designed by IDEO, which was about managing and controlling your medication at home. And I suggest reading up about it. It was a small little project, right? It seemed like a small little project, but it was bought by Amazon for, how much was it? Over $1 billion in 2018, right? So it was solving the problem of people forgetting about their medication, what to do, what not to do. And some of the products, and it's many of the product organizations we're working in today, whether we're talking, and I know it's going to be controversial, maybe some people will freak out, but for example, working at Farfetch, like I used to, right? Working at OLX, I noticed that working at, for example, Codacy, where I worked at High Interactive, obviously we worked with a lot of customers, like OutSystems, we worked with A2B, which was Breeze Innovation. All of these companies, they're trying, right? They're actually looking and they're trying to figure out what the customers need, what the users need. They're trying to design, thinking about that. But, and this is an important part, never forgetting about the business as well, right? Because if we don't make money, how do we design for the user? And that's what they do. They've managed to find this balance and they're working on that balance. Is it perfect all the time? No. Will they make mistakes? Of course they will. But it's an iterative process, right? They're developing, they're evolving, and then people will talk about Netflix's, General Electric Health. They'll talk about Uber Eats, tons of other product organizations that are trying to do this. And they're user-centric to an extent, right? Because, and I remember 10 years ago, nobody talked about being user-centric, right? It was like you used to go to a company.
All about user centricity.
And now almost any company you go to, a person says they talk about user experience. They talk about the users, right? They talk about their customers. And you're like, that's a win for me, right? We've already won. So so you see it even in more traditional organizations. You're starting to see this change a lot.
Yeah, I can share a story here at Interactive when we started doing workshop sessions with our commercial team to understand their process, how they are getting the sales, how they are looking for. And I was very happy realizing that they understood that we could apply this process or this methodology to solve a specific problem, that it's not a digital product, or that it's not a screen. Other thing was we were able to learn how they work and help them with tips on. They don't need to know everything about UX, but they know things that can help them approach clients, and we start this synergy working together using those kinds of methodology. And this is something that can bring a really big impact on the results, that the work that different teams do, like in this example, our commercial team and our UX design team helping the commercial team. And it was brutal, the impact that, and I was amazed when they understood that they were using design thinking to solve a specific problem, and I was very happy with that.
And I'm sure you remember the time when we worked together in Teacup, working with public entities, government entities, and we would go in there and we would start talking about these methodologies, and they would look at us and say, well, this seems very strange, and things like that. And they would become huge fans, and they would really enjoy solving problems with us, and it was super helpful in that sense.
Yes, and just because we use the approach of bringing those teams to the process they were part of, so they were responsible for, and I think that is the most impactful advantage of using a process like this. One other question that I want to add, Hugo, we were talking about different companies, more technological companies with different process. What is your take when we have a design thinking process and we need to integrate them with business that's already ongoing and they have their own methodologies and their own process? What is your experience and what would you advise for us to combine different methodologies?
Well, I'm a big fan of being methodology agnostic, if that makes sense. I believe that what happens is all of these methodologies, like you were saying right in the beginning, they're tools, right? They're tools to try and do something. They're trying to solve something. And what we find is if we open up our minds, we find that all of them have tons of value. All of them have flaws. And so one of the things we try and do is, and it's something I try and focus on right now, is first understanding how the teams are working right now, right? And that's an important thing, how they're working, why they're working that way, trying to find the justification behind it. And then through that, you kind of try and pick what's working really well. And then what isn't working well, what needs to change. And then I'll try and use a design thinking methodology, right? I'll try and look at the problem and say, how can we look at this in a different way? How can we step out of our comfort zone and look at this in a different way? And that's what we try and do, is try and say, okay, let's test something out. And then it's about bringing the right people into the same room together, talking about that problem, trying to solve it, and then seeing the impact, iterating on it, trying to evolve it and see how it evolves and it starts impacting the team. I'd never try and go there and say, we're going to be design thinking across the board. Easy to do that when you're in a startup, almost impossible to do that in an enterprise organization, right? Because either one of two things, people are just going to complain. They're going to do it, but they're going to complain the whole time and they're not going to adopt it properly, or you're going to get tons and tons of pushback.
And it will not work.
Exactly. So the thing is, it's kind of trying to find that balance and squeezing it in with them. And sometimes it's actually taking away the jargon, right? So I might pick something from Agile, from Lean, from Scrum, from Kanban, from design thinking, whatever, right? And I'll pick little bits of these things.
Case, right?
Exactly. And I'll say, I like this exercise from this one. I like that one from that one, and bring that in. And you don't tell the team, oh no, this is the new lean process or this is the new agile process. You turn around and you say, okay, what we're going to try is do this. And you focus more on the results you're trying to achieve with the exercise, right? And to an extent, it's actually very useful because people aren't associating it to a specific way of working, right? And I'll hear 100 times where people say, oh, but this isn't agile way of working. And I'll turn around and say, well, in this case, the agile way of working doesn't make sense, right? And oh, how can you say that? Agile is the only way to develop products. It's like, well, I'm here to challenge that thinking, right? Exactly. So I like to challenge the thinking constantly. So for me, it's actually fun doing these things. But it's exactly that, right? Trying to find that middle ground with the teams, adapting to them, working with them to try and find the ways of working. And yeah, it's just finding the best way. Because I think a lot of these methodologies and concepts and frameworks, a lot of them are duplicates of other ones that already exist. It's the same thing, just in a different way, and you change one thing and let's not overcomplicate, right?
Other activity there.
First principles, right? Going back to first principles, break it down to the easiest thinking about the problem. Look at it from a new perspective, as in, I'm new to the problem. I haven't been influenced by 500 frameworks. What am I trying to solve? And that's what I like to tell people. Go back to the basics. What are you trying to solve, right? And again, it's a basic thing that we forget very often.
That's a good advice. And you were talking about challenges and obstacles in the organization that they may face when implementing design thinking or other methodologies. What, in your point of view, could be those main challenges, and how can we overcome them?
Yeah, I think obviously we've spoken about a few of the challenges around, not trusting the process or, trying to make these changes without knowing why you're making the changes or understanding the processes. But there's also an important part, which is overcommitting, right? And that's something that happens very often, which is, I decide this is how we're going to work and we're going to commit to this. And you're like, okay, fine. So let's commit to this for X amount of time. And then you see 6 months down the line, it's not working. And you keep pushing it. And you keep saying, because I believe this is the way we have to work. And you're like, but it's not working. And people will keep pushing it, right? You have to be careful. You have to be careful, and you have to be okay with taking a step back. I'm not saying that there isn't some impact in someone going in and saying, you know what, we've been doing it wrong this whole time. Let's make a big change and everything like that. And let's actually do this properly now. The problem is that what usually happens with that is it's a lot of confusion, a lot of mess that happens in the teams. Very few people can do that well. And so it usually ends up becoming a mess. So there's a great book by Chip and Dan Heath, which is called Switch. And it's a great book, which I recommend to people. The basic concept.
That's on our comments as well. For everyone.
So it's called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath.
Okay.
It's basically the concept is that they're sharing is the smallest thing that you can do that creates the biggest potential impact, right? Yeah. And sometimes people forget about this, which is it's not about saying I'm going to change the end-to-end process, right? It's about finding that small lever, that small thing that you just switch, and it has a trickle effect that affects so much more, right? And they've got great examples of big companies, countries, things like that did this, where they changed one thing, they changed their strategy, or they changed the focus just on one thing, and all the company benefited from that, right? Everything benefited from that. And so it's finding that rather than always we have to rethink the whole process and everything like that.
All again and starting from scratch.
And I'll admit, I did that in the past, right? I did that various times in various companies. And now I realize that I know now why it wouldn't work, right? Why it never seemed to pick up.
Yes, it's, all about balancing design thinking with the existing process, right? And measure the impact and the success, like quantifying the impact of specific activities, and continues to follow those measurements and guarantee that we are in the right path could be something that be helpful for a company as well.
Exactly. No, exactly that, right? You have to always you have to control those things, but you have to be aware of exactly how you're measuring the impact, always making sure it's about managing the change, right? And understanding that big changes usually have a huge impact on the teams. We have to also be careful about drastic, crazy changes all the time, right?
Yes.
So it's about finding that balance. It's about finding that perfect balance for sure.
And what is about measuring the success on companies? What is your take on that? For example, here in High Interactive, we are implementing a process that help us to measure the impact and help clients to understand what were the improvements in terms of value in a short periods of projects in a short times of project, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. How can we do that? We are trying to implement a process like that and test it, and we are getting some results. Do you have any takes on something like that that can help us to measure something when we are not working in a product company, that we can follow to eternal iterative process of something?
It's a complicated one, right? It's a complicated one because I also know how customers are, right? The project is finished, thank you, you handed it over, and we'll see you in another 2 years or 3 if we need anything, right? And usually we can only start measuring these things 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, right? The actual impact something had. But what I try to do, and in any of these projects that I approach, especially when we're talking about, customers that we're going to be, if we're working in a consultancy or in an agency or something like that, right? Or what I try and focus on is trying to find the metrics that the project will create an impact on, right? Like I remember a couple of years ago, we were working on a golfing application or something like that, right? For golfers to schedule their tee time, right? Schedule their tee time. And what happened was there was no actual digital way of doing it. It was all manual. So you would ring up, you would schedule it, and that's how it was done. And so there wasn't any direct measurable way of, connecting the two. But what we tried to do there was we looked and we said, okay, actually, let's call up and see how long we take to do this reservation, right? And that's what happens. Then how many cancellations are happening at this moment, right? When we're doing it manually, and this amount of times, right? So trying to find those metrics that made sense. It's like a proxy metric, but it's something you're trying to solve right now. And so what happens is then we can look in the future and say, well, the app solved the problem, which is, number one, there's less mistakes on reservations, for example. Number two, we improve the time a person takes to actually reserve. We decreased the amount of cancellations because there was a confusion or a mess or something like that, right? All of these things was a way we could look and tangible way that we can measure the impact, and you can do that right away, right? Because we can almost do that as you're testing it in the first phases with customers, right? Where you've got these metrics there. And so it's trying to find those proxy metrics, right? And defining those right at the beginning of the organization. Ideally, you try and negotiate some time to measure in the future again.
Yes.
Right? But it's not easy. I know it's not, right? Because customers will say, yeah, sure. And then it never comes up again. But
yes, it's the process.
Exactly. But I think that there's nothing worse than if you've worked with a customer in this case and, 6 months or a year down the line, they come back to you and they turn around and say, you know what, things went terribly wrong. We had to throw the product out the window or something, suddenly we had a bombardment of calls and things were going terribly wrong and things like that. Equally, if someone comes back to us and says, you know what, best project we've ever worked on, if we had more money, we would bring you back. But right now we don't have the budget for it, right? Best thing you can hear ever, actually. So I again, the customers will also tell us, right? We also know what will happen, because even if we are reasonably good, or we can fool customers that we are good, right? It reaches a point where you start burning bridges, right? There's too many customers that you burn. You will get a point where you can't get new customers because word of mouth does get around. So if the sustainability of your organization usually is also a good indicator of the potential that you can bring value to them as well. So there's various things there.
Thanks, Hugo. João, I don't know if we have any questions from the audience to answer.
Okay, as of now, we don't. Although I think we have one. I guess we have some from our team that they left us to ask you both. And in the meantime, while I read these questions, please, if you have any questions, you can drop it on the chat box. We will be more than happy to have all of your questions answered. And yeah, so let's go to the team questions. I want to ask you both, how do you think it would be the role of processes like design thinking working with AI experiences?
I'm happy to go on this. I don't know. There's a lot of conversation around AI, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually a conversation. I remember I had this conversation when I was at High Interactive, which was the way I see AI in general is as an enhancer or an enabler of the design thinking process, right? So there's a lot of stuff that manually there's bias when we do it, right? There's a lot of bias when we do a lot of the stuff. When we do analysis of the things, we can't look at big data points, big amounts of data points, tons of information, right? I can't as easily recognize the patterns if we're talking about, big data sets or anything like that. Design, obviously AI can help us with that. So that's one point, right? Which is it can help us in terms of the work, in terms of taking away some of the stuff that humans aren't as good at doing, right? And machines are better. But more than that, I think it also brings a way of thinking, right? Which is it challenges our way of thinking because, and it's one of the ways I like to use it is I throw questions in there and it'll come back with something. I don't take it at face value. What I do is, okay, you've challenged my thinking. Now I'm going to challenge you. And I start having a sort of, debate with the system and figuring it out. And I try and, I kind of try and break down its thinking. But then I also think, hold on, but he just mentioned, the AI just mentioned this. That's super interesting. That actually changes the way I thought about that other problem. And so it becomes this thing where it also expands the way we look at problem solving, the way we look at things. I mean, obviously, many of the AI models have some bias to them, but even so, right? Even so, they do because they've got a wider range of information than we could as humans, right? And unless I talk to very specific humans, I might never touch on those points, right? And so it helps on those things. So that's the two ways I see it personally, but...
Yes, I agree with you. I think that can help us to, for example, in a specific case when we are starting a project, that an enterprise project that we don't know nothing about the business, don't know nothing about the users, can help us to guide. We prepare some activities and some starting points to validate some assumptions and start to talking with real people. And I think there's still a lot of work to do as designers to establish and create and learn good practices on using technologies like that, how users are going to interact with that. We need to continuous learning with the topic as well.
Yeah. Okay, and I think that covers up the question. So we have another question, and now this one is from the chat, is from the audience. It's from Manuel Pimenta. He said he's not sure if we have already answered this or not, but he wants to ask that, do you believe that DT, that I don't know what DT is, has now become a standard for any serious company's product/projects design stages? I know now what DT is design
thinking.
okay.
Natali, you go first now.
Okay. I don't think that should be a standard, as we are saying at the beginning. In my opinion, is something that we can use as a guide to help us to find solutions, to bring conversation with other teams, and we can always adapt to something that would be better for that specific team. If this step, for example, if a workshop, it's not something that I can work with in this specific project, we're not gonna do it. I think that we should use as a guide to help us find solutions and define problems, and not as a standard that we shouldn't change or should follow as a Bible.
Yeah. And maybe I'll add to that, right? And maybe to Manuel's question is, I don't think it's standard at all. And I'll be honest, a lot of companies talk about how they do design thinking and how they have a design thinking methodology, and generally they don't actually. Right? So it's sometimes something as a vanity a vanity statement to an extent, or to say that they're trending, like all the design focused companies, but they don't, right? So what they've done is they've maybe done 1 or 2 workshops. They might do 1 or 2 things, but then they'll say, you ask them, have you spoken to a customer? And they'll say, no, I haven't spoken to a customer. Why would I do that? We all know what the product is. And you're just like, no, that's the problem. If you're not including the customers and the users, so it's not standard, right? And it hasn't been widely adopted. It's kind of funny because people are talking badly about design thinking now, and I think it was never actually properly adopted in most companies. So, but that's my opinion, maybe.
Yes, it's I think sometimes what could happen is most companies use it to validate an idea that they already have, and they don't want to change it, just want to validate and continue doing that, and that is when things go wrong.
Exactly. It's like me asking the question of, how incredible do you think I am? Right? I told you I'm incredible, right? I'm influencing your answer, right? It's the same
I will
thing.
answer very, very incredible.
But it's a biased question, right? Just like if you do design thinking with that strong bias towards it, or just to validate your idea, it'll validate your idea because you want it to, right?
Already influencing the answer.
Exactly.
Okay, and I think that's it for Manuel's question.
Thank you. I hope we have answered.
Yeah.
If not, reach out afterwards and we can discuss more. No problem.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, I have a third question, and this one is also from High Interactive team, like the first one, and it says, from your experience as UX designers, how do you feel that like UX designers do to bring quality into solutions working with design thinking?
That's a good one. Go ahead, Natali.
Well, I guess that we talk a little bit about those things during our conversation, but I guess is the collaborative work as like evangelists to bring people to talk to us, and not take the approach of I am the one that you should follow, but understand what is on the other side. Try to understand their language, their way of talking. It's a better way to use this process and have good results. Other thing that I think that really work to come up with better solutions is to set expectations. Everyone at the beginning should understand what we are going to get in each phase, who is responsible for which activities, and bring the teams to work with us. Those are kind of attitudes that will help us to come up with better solutions at the end, I think, using a process like this.
Yeah, it's all valid points, and I would maybe just add the fact is, when UX designers are involved, and considering they're taking the right approach, they're doing it the right way, they bring various things, right? One is they think about that experience, that the impact that it's going to have on the user, right? So they create a holistic, structured, and more catered experience, right? They focus on that experience to create for what, and they focus on a user need, right? On a user problem, on user frustration. So it's not just solving a problem for the sake of solving a problem, right? They're solving a real need or something. So they focus on that, because building stuff, we can all build products, right? And now it's even easier than ever it was before. But where user experience or UX designers bring a difference is they look at it and they say, okay, sure, but are we actually solving a real problem? Are we bringing something that is valuable to the customers, to the people who are going to be using it, and how they're going to be interacting with it? And taking into consideration all the context of where people are using it, how they're using it, who are the people that are using it. It brings that whole conversation and connects the team back to the people they're designing for, right? It brings the team, it keeps bringing them back. To say that designers nowadays aren't the only defenders of the users. I've heard product managers as well, engineers as well, saying, but what about the user? This is going to break the user experience, right? Designers helped build that culture, right? They helped influence that culture. And that's what they keep doing, right? They keep bringing us back to the, hold on a sec, yes, but what is the problem we're trying to solve, can we make it delightful, but just for the sake of being delightful in terms of visuals? No. Can we make it delightful because I can interact with it? I can do what I need to do. Yes, that's what I want to try and do, right? And designers try and bring it back to that. So they bring a lot of value in that sense.
Okay. So without any more questions, I think that's it for the first talk. Thanks, Hugo, for your insights. Thanks, Natali.
Thank you, Hugo. I love it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and thanks for the ones at home who stood by till the end and got to witness this masterpiece that was this talk. And yeah, if you have any questions, because this is going to be on demand, it will stay here at Interactive's YouTube channel. If you have any questions, you can also drop them on the chat box. We will answer whenever you feel the need to drop your questions. And yeah, as I said in the beginning, like and subscribe. We have plenty more content like this coming up for you into 2024. And yeah, happy holidays for the ones I will not see until then. And yeah, thanks Hugo and Natali, and see you on the next one.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.